Hi there, my name is Jason Walker, and welcome to my YouTube channel and my very first YouTube video, at least for this particular purpose. So I just wanted to take a few minutes with this first video and introduce you to myself, and kind of let you know the purpose of my YouTube channels and sort of the focus of what my videos are going to be about as I post them. And hopefully, um, my real hope is that people will watch and people will learn, and that we will engage in a conversation that will be helpful for all of us. So, a little bit about me and my background. I'm 46 years old, about to turn 47 years old. I am from a very small town in northeast Texas called Grand Saline. And when I say very small, I mean very small, less than 3,000 people in the town that I grew up in. Um, I have a bachelor's degree from Texas Tech University and a master's degree from the University of Texas at Tyler. And I am currently working on my PhD in English at Texas A&M University Commerce. And there's going to be a little bit of an interesting twist about that school later on in the video, so stay tuned for that. Um, I grew up in a single parent household. My parents were divorced when I was very, very young, about 4 years old. And so all of my memories from childhood basically are after my parents had split up. Um, my sister and I lived with my mother, and we visited with my dad every other weekend and every other holiday, the whole, that typical custody arrangement that people have. Um, from a very early age, and this is sort of the focus of my both my blog and my YouTube channel. From a very early age, I was a really anxious kid. I had a lot of problems with anxiety, although back then we didn't really call it anxiety. People back in the 70s and early 80s, people hadn't really heard of anxiety or panic attacks. In fact, I never heard the word panic attack until I was in college. And so when I was a little kid, you would hear about women who had nervous breakdowns and men who had midlife crises, and the women would start taking Valium and they would go to their rooms and they wouldn't hang around people that much. And the men who had these midlife crises would, buy Corvettes and have affairs, which, now that I think about it, maybe that's why a lot of the women were ending up having to take Valium, but that's a whole other story. And I'm not being sexist. Please understand. I'm not being sexist. That's just the way it was back then. We didn't talk about anxiety and panic attacks. Women had nervous breakdowns and men had midlife crises, and that's just the way it was. But I was a nervous little kid. I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of things, a lot of manifestations of that anxiety. The the one that I remember the most is that when I was a little kid, probably 5, 6, 7 years old, something like that, I started twisting my hair. I would take my finger and I would twist my hair and twist and twist and twist until I twisted it in a knot. And I don't have nearly enough hair to do that now, but I would twist my hair until I twisted in a knot, and these knots would be so tight that my mother would literally have to get a pair of scissors and cut them out. And I would twist 3 or 4 knots in my hair just sitting on the couch at night watching TV. But back then, again, we didn't know about anxiety and panic attacks, and so I was just a weird little kid with a weird little kid habit. And eventually, I stopped doing that. But there were other things, like I would get really nervous when I had to go somewhere. When I sometimes even just going to school, going to church, going to visit my dad on the weekend, I would get really nervous, and I had a very nervous stomach, and I would get sick to my stomach, and I would vomit. But again, it was just, I was a kid with a nervous stomach, and people didn't really think very much about it back then like that. Um, I also I would get hives. I would get nervous hives on me. Only back then, we didn't know it was nervous hives. We thought I was allergic to, a new laundry soap or freshly cut grass or something else. But I remember a specific time when I was in first grade, and it was late in the year, my first grade year. We were about to have field day at school, and we all got to wear shorts that day. But I didn't want to wear shorts because I had hives all over my legs, and I was embarrassed about it. It was very embarrassing to me, and so I can remember crying and begging my mother to let me wear jeans to field day. I was going to be running around and running relay races and stuff like that, but I wanted to wear jeans because I was so embarrassed about those hives, and she finally let me. But again, we didn't really think much about it because I was just a kid and I had hives and maybe I had allergies. But I think now that I look back on it, I think that maybe my mom probably did know that something was wrong, that something wasn't right with that. But what was she going to do? She was a single mother. She had very few resources for anything like that. And besides that, no, little kids didn't have problems like that. Little kids didn't have nervous breakdowns, and little kids certainly didn't have midlife crises. And so, what was anybody going to do about it? Besides that, these things that happened to me, they didn't really affect my life all that much. I mean, I did things. I went to school places, and I went to school trips, and I went on family vacations, and I went on band trips when I was in high school. So it didn't really affect me all that much. I would just have to take enough Donagel or Pepto Bismol or Malox that I wish that my family had stock in those companies back then. We could be filthy rich. I took so much of it. But that's just kind of how it was. We did those things to remedy the symptoms, and then I just kind of went on with my life. But something changed my freshman year in college. Um, I went to a school called East Texas State University. Now, I told you earlier there was something interesting about where I was doing my PhD work. I'm doing my PhD work at Texas A&M University at Commerce. Texas A&M University at Commerce was once called East Texas State University, and that's where I started college when I graduated high school in 1990. And so I went to college at East Texas State University. It wasn't very far from my home, maybe about 40 miles or so. I went there on a band scholarship. Now, what you need to know about this is that I was a pretty good musician in high school. I played trumpet, and I was a pretty good musician in high school. I won all kinds of awards, and I was selected to honor bands, and I had all kinds of scholarship offers. And at one time, the United States Marine Corps even tried to get me to come and play for one of their bands. So I had all of these offers from people because I was a pretty good musician. In my mind, I mean, excuse my language, but in my mind, I thought I was the shit. But I went up to East Texas State University and I learned really quickly that it's very easy to be a big fish in a small pond. And I had never been anything other than first or second chair, either in my home band in my high school or in the honor bands that I had been. I had always either been first or second chair. I had never played any part except the first trumpet part, which is the top part. But at East Texas State University, I was 11th chair and I played third trumpet. My very first music theory assignment, I failed miserably. I mean, I didn't even come close to passing that assignment. So things were already not going great. Top that off with an incident that happened at band practice one day. Our practice field was basically a big concrete slab that they had drawn yard lines and hash marks on. And so we would walk out to the practice field every day at the end of the day. I think it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon or so. And we would practice. And one day we were out there practicing, and I remember we were practicing our drill to a march called Crown Imperial by William Walton, which happens to be one of my all-time favorite marches. So I was really excited about getting to do this. We were out there, and our band director, Mr. Bennett, had stopped us to make an adjustment to one of the sets. And while we were standing there and I was waiting on the drum major to call us back to attention, I started feeling really dizzy. Just everything started spinning. My ears started ringing. I felt like I was going to pass out, and I kind of just dropped to the ground. And a couple of my bandmates, helped me up and got me off the field, and I got some water and I sat in the shade and I rested. This was in August in Texas, so it was probably 100 degrees or more. And in truth, probably what happened that day was I got overheated and I hadn't had enough water. I just needed to cool off and rehydrate, and eventually the symptoms went away and I was okay. But the next day it happened again, only this time it happened before we ever finished our warm-up. And then the third day it happened as we were walking from the band hall out to the practice field. And I can remember Mr. Bennett called me into his office. He was very worried about me. And he told me that he really wanted me to see a doctor before he would let me march again. He wanted me to go to a doctor, make sure everything was okay before he could let me march again, because he was worried about my health. And I told him that I would, but I never did. In fact, I never went back to band practice again. And a few days later, after I had missed 5 band practices in a row, Mr. Bennett called me to his office again and told me that if I didn't come the next day with either a doctor's note or come to practice, that I probably would lose my scholarship. And I told him that I understood. And I went back to my dorm room and I packed all of my stuff up in the trunk of my car and I drove off campus and I never went back. Those were panic attacks that I was having. The first one probably wasn't, but the second and third were definitely panic attacks that I was having, only I didn't know it. But that really is what began this, what I call the modern era of my panic attacks, where I had the symptoms that I'm familiar with now: the dizziness, the lightheadedness, the ringing ears, the pounding heart, shortness of breath, shakiness, feel like I'm going to pass out. This was the beginning of that time in my life. And over the last 28 years since that happened, there have really been about 4 periods of time where my anxiety and panic attacks have been what I refer to, this is not a medical term, but what I refer to as in the malignant phase, where they happen very frequently and they damage my way of life. And when they come on, and when I'm in periods like that, which I happen to be in one of those periods now, my life is significantly altered because of them. I've lost jobs. I've lost friends. I've damaged relationships. I've hurt my family, not physically, but I've hurt my family just in not being able to be present for things. That's one of the things that I hope to accomplish with first my blog, which I started about 10 years ago, and now this YouTube channel. What I hope to accomplish is coming to a sense of understanding for people who don't suffer with generalized anxiety disorder and or panic attacks, which I have both. I want them to understand that those of us who suffer from anxiety and panic, we have a very hard time because we don't always know when these things are coming on. In fact, most of the time, I don't know. If there were some sign, if there were some warning sign or some symptom that I could identify, that when I felt it coming on, I said, hey, I'm about to go into a bad period with my panic attacks, I could probably do something to stop it. But the problem is that I don't get that warning. They literally happen out of the blue. They happen completely unexpectedly. I don't get any kind of a warning, And that's true with most of the people that I've talked to about their panic attacks as well. And so what happens is that without warning, we go from fairly functional, normal people to people who can't get out of our house. And it happens just that quickly. It literally happens almost overnight that one minute I'm okay, I'm out eating dinner with my friends, I'm having fun, I'm going places with my family, I have a great job, I have a great career, and the next day I can't get out of bed. I can't get out of my room, I can't get out of my house because I'm struck with these panic attacks. And they're horrible, and I'll talk more about the symptoms probably in a later video, but just so you know now that there's no warning signs for them. We don't get any kind of a warning. There's no like guy with a little flag waving, hey, you're about to go into a bad period with your anxiety. That doesn't happen. So I want people to understand that. My purpose in first the blog, which again I started about 10 years ago during another bad period with my panic. And now with this YouTube channel is, number one, I want to be a voice for people who suffer like I do, who have no voice. I want to be able to say the words that they either can't say, are too embarrassed to say, or are too afraid to say. There's a whole lot of stigma attached to anxiety and panic attacks. There's a whole lot of stigma attached to mental health issues in general. There's a whole lot of stigma attached to anxiety and panic attacks. And so a lot of us who suffer don't want to talk about it. It's not something that we want to bring up. It's not something that we want to reveal to people. And so what happens is that we tend to back away from society. We pull away from the people who love us and the people who care about us. We don't go out and do things. We just kind of keep to ourselves because we're embarrassed about it. It's incredibly embarrassing. And it's incredibly frightening. And so we just don't talk about it. The second thing that I want to do is educate people who don't suffer with anxiety and panic attacks about what they are and about how they impact those of us who do, because they have a real impact on our lives, a real effect on our lives. And it's and nothing, no guilt on the people who don't suffer. If you don't suffer from panic attacks and anxiety, you couldn't possibly understand what it's like to go through these issues. And so I want this to be a process of education for people who don't suffer with anxiety and panic attacks, because I think that a lot of awareness needs to be made. And then the third goal of both my blog and this YouTube channel now is to be an advocate for mental health issues in the United States. In this country, we have a terrible, terrible track record of addressing mental health issues. We just don't. There's so much stigma and so much shame attached to all mental health issues that they don't get addressed. There's not adequate funding for them, and people who suffer with these illnesses frequently can't work, so they don't have money, they don't have health insurance, so they're left out in the cold. They can't get the help that they need. They can't get the help that could really help benefit their lives because there's nothing available for them. They can't afford it on their own. They have no health insurance. And even if they did have health insurance is woefully terrible about covering mental health treatment. Even if they did have health insurance, they still wouldn't be able to do it. So I want to be an advocate for mental health issues in this country because we have a terrible track record, and that has to change, because mental health issues are costing this country millions and billions of dollars every single year. And if you don't believe me, you can go look up the statistics. So those are the reasons that I started the blog, and those are the reasons that now I've started this YouTube channel. So that's kind of my history. It's kind of who I am and my long and complicated history with anxiety and panic attacks. I hope that in the process of doing these videos that something that I say can help you in some way, or educate you in some way, or at the very least, just help you know that you are not alone, because you aren't. For every symptom that you think you're the only person in the world that has, there are millions of people who have that exact same symptom. Every time you have a panic attack and you think, my God, I must be the only person in the world who feels that way, there are millions of other people who feel exactly the same way. So know that you are very much not alone. I'm going to put my contact information in the summary of this video. I want you to feel free to contact me anytime. You can contact me here on YouTube. You can send me a message, or you can comment on this video. I don't post any comments that I don't approve. So if there's something private in your comment that you don't want anybody to see, you can say, this is just for you. I only want you to see this, and I will not post your comment, but I'll answer you for sure. You can contact me through YouTube. You can contact me on Facebook. You can contact me on Instagram. You can contact me via email. Now, I didn't include my phone number because I also use my phone for work, and so I'm a little cautious about giving out my phone number. But email, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, you can contact me on any one of those, and I promise you, I will contact you back. Now, understand, I am not a mental health professional. I do not have a degree for treating mental health. I don't have training for treating mental health. Who I am is someone who has suffered with anxiety, panic attacks, and depression to some extent since I was a very young kid. So I have a lot of experience with it. And I can be empathetic, I can be sympathetic, I can be a listening ear, and I can tell you what's worked for me. But I want to be sure that you guys understand, do not take what I'm telling you today as medical advice. I am not giving you medical advice. And one of the things that I'm going to tell you at the end of every single one of my videos is that if right now you're going through a time where you are considering hurting yourself or someone else, please, please, please pick up a phone and call 911 and get help. Because if you're at that point where you're thinking about hurting yourself or hurting someone else, you need help immediately. Call the National Suicide Hotline. That information is also down in the summary of this post. There are resources out there. There are people who are willing to help, and there is help to be had if you reach out for it. I'll be glad to listen to you. I'll be glad to answer questions that you have. I'll be happy to help you any way that I can. But if you are going through a very hard time right now, and your anxiety, your panic, your depression is impacting your life, then you need professional help. And I don't say that flippantly. I don't say that sarcastically. I'm being serious. If your anxiety, your panic, your depression, or whatever else you're having is impacting your life, then you need to seek professional help, and you need to do it quickly. So yeah, that's it. I mean, this is the first video, hopefully one of many. I'm going to try to post every week. I don't know that I'll be able to post every week, but I'm going to do my best to post at least once a week, every week. Again, if you need to talk to somebody, please reach out. I'll be happy to talk to you. I'll be happy to listen. So, first one down. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to click the subscribe button and also click the little bell next to it so that you get notifications when I post a video. Also, if you like this video, click the thumbs up and share the video. You never know who you might know who needs some help and could benefit by hearing the stories that I'm going to tell. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening, and I wish you absolutely love and light forever. See you next time. Bye-bye.